My name is Thea Whitmore, and if you've heard of me, it's probably as a footnote. The unwanted daughter of a shining dynasty, the piece that never fit on the golden chessboard of power. My parents always said I was hard to shape, hard to silence, hard to predict. As a kid, they tried to break me with etiquette lessons and private tutors. In my teens, with veiled threats and disappointed glares. And when all that failed, they decided to offer me up, like I was a burden to be shed with grace, wrapped in ceremony and fake honor. No one asked if I wanted to go. No one told me exactly. What happened to women sent as tribute to the Dragon King. They just said it was a chance to save what was left of the alliance, a chance to prove my worth, as if my worth was tied to my use as a human shield. The day I left was dry and clear, like even the sky refused to cry for me. They dressed me in white silk, tucked flowers into my hair, taught me the speech I was supposed to recite if I lived long enough to speak. But no one met my eyes. Not my father. Not my sisters. Not the priests who muttered blessings in flat, lifeless tones. They all seemed relieved. Like my absence finally scrubbed the rebel blood running through the Whitmore line clean. The trip to the edge of the dragon's territory took 2 days, but my mind had already checked out before the first step, and when the guards dropped me, off alone, at the ancient stone gate carved into the black cliffs of the Pacific Northwest, there were no goodbyes, just the sound of retreating boots and the silence of the world waiting for my sentence. I thought I'd feel fear, but what hit me was colder, a bitter certainty. I was a prisoner, sure, but not because I was there. I'd been a prisoner since the day I was born. Then he showed up. Not like the stories say, not some shadow in the clouds. He walked, simple as that. A man, or something wearing a man's shape, too tall, too quiet, eyes like burning coals, and a weight in the air that made me forget how to breathe. There was something about him that didn't belong to the world, and yet there he was, watching me like he was sizing up a weapon before deciding to wield it or snap it in half. I should have trembled, should have begged. But something in me rose up just as strong. Maybe because I had nothing left to lose. Maybe because, for the first time, I was facing someone who didn't see me as a failure, but as a threat. The Dragon King took a step forward. The ground seemed to buckle, and I knew, without a doubt, that if he wanted, he could turn me to ash in a single breath. But I also knew something deeper, more dangerous. He didn't expect me to look back at him, not like that, steady, unflinching, fearless. And in that brief moment when the silence between us stretched like a blade about to strike, a spark ignited in the space between who we were and what we were made to be. They sent me to die, but I came to challenge the fire. He didn't say anything, at first, and neither did I. We just sized each other up in silence, like two predators meeting for the first time, unsure whether to fight or acknowledge each other. The world there felt different, older, heavier. The air carried the scent of hot metal and damp earth, like the ground itself remembered the blood spilled because of him. And still, I didn't back down. There was a quiet anger pulsing in me, not at him, but at everyone who thought dressing me in purity and tossing me to the monster would fix what they couldn't handle. He turned without a word and started walking, expected me to follow, and I did, not out of submission but choice. Because some part of me, maybe the part that was never tamed, knew that wherever this led, it'd be truer than anything I'd left behind. His stronghold wasn't marble or gold like human mansions. It was raw, alive, with walls that seemed to breathe, to pulse. Nothing about it told me I'd be spared, no comfort, no illusion of safety. But there, amid shadows and heat, there were no masks either. And that was the first freedom I tasted, not having to pretend, He watched me with that silent intensity that said more than any sentence. And when his voice finally cut through the space between us, it was like a sharp blade brushing bare skin. Deep, slow, precise. You're not chained. You can go. But he knew, and I did too, that there was nowhere to go back to. Still, the choice spoken aloud was a taunt, an invitation to see who I was without shackles. I didn't come by choice, I replied. But now that I'm here, I don't plan to die quietly. If he expected pleading, he got defiance. If he expected fear, he found fire. And for a fleeting second, I saw something flicker in his eyes, a spark of something old, buried. Curiosity? Respect? Maybe. But what came next wasn't a threat. It was a laugh. Low, rare, like a crack splitting ice. Then speak, human. I'm listening. Those words were the start of everything. And though I didn't know it then, that's where I planted the first root in the beast's heart. Not with charm or softness, but with truth. And beings who've lived too long, who carry ages on their backs and fire in their bones, they can't resist what's real. That night, I was left alone in a high chamber, with windows opening to a sky full of smoke and faded stars. I didn't sleep. I sat staring at the horizon, listening to the distant sound of something moving deep in the mountain. Wings, maybe, or memories, or my own fear trying to remind me I shouldn't feel alive there, but I did, more than ever. At first, he barely spoke, just watched, like every word was too precious to waste on someone like me. But I saw how his eyes darkened when I talked about my world, what we called civilization. Saw how his shoulders tensed when I mentioned old treaties, wars, names, that lived only in books no one read anymore. And despite the silence, I felt it. He knew every word before I said it. Not because he'd heard them, but because he'd lived them. And there was something unbearably lonely in someone who held everyone's memory and belonged to no one. I started wandering the halls, no map, no destination. I wasn't a prisoner, but I wasn't a guest either. I was something else, somewhere, between mistake and exception. No one watched me, no one gave orders, but the air always felt full of unseen eyes, alert, like the place itself breathed around me. And still, I went, testing the limits, the echoes, the spaces not built for humans that now sheltered one anyway. And with every corner I found, every detail carved by inhuman hands, I shed, bit by bit, the idea of what was right. He'd show up sometimes like the wind, no warning, no pattern. Just there, with that gaze that burned more than it scared. A presence that pushed the world away and left just the two of us at the center. In those moments, we didn't taunt each other. We talked. It started with clipped sentences, dry questions. Then came the stories. Loose fragments he let slip, like he didn't want to but couldn't hold them all in anymore. Wars humans forgot, betrayals never punished, lost siblings, kingdoms swallowed by fire and time, and I listened. Not like someone collecting legends, but like someone hearing a man bleed through his words. And something strange grew in me. Not pity, something closer, more dangerous. Because the more he stopped being a monster in my eyes, the more I hated to face the ferocity of what made me. I remember the first time I touched him, not with my hands, but with a question. A simple sentence, dropped into the silence. "Do you miss it?" He stopped. Just that. Like time forgot to move for a second. And then his answer came. Quiet, almost human. No. Missing things is a luxury you forget after centuries. But he was lying, and I knew it. Because missing isn't something that fades with time. It's something that hides behind anger, pride, silence. And his eyes, even under that armor of disdain, were full of it. That's when I understood. There were cracks in this creature of legend, and through them something alive still pulsed, something he might not even know how to name. And me? I was starting to wonder if that ancient fire burned to destroy me or to wake me up. As days passed, or weeks, I couldn't tell anymore. Something shifted between us. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a single moment when we stopped being stranger and monster. But the space between us started to shrink. First in words, then in silences. I began noticing details in Cale that were hidden before by the sheer scale of the creature he was. The way his eyes lingered on mine when I spoke without fear. How his shoulders, always taut, softened slightly when I told him the stories I'd made up as a kid to survive the weight of being unwanted. And he told me things too, slowly in pieces, not like confessions, but like he was testing the world with words he'd held for centuries. He spoke of his siblings, hunted down like beasts, one by one, until only he remained. Of his queen, who died defending a promise humans don't remember, because they forget what doesn't suit them. And he spoke of himself, not as a king, but as a remnant. A survivor of something so vast, he didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse to still be here, remembering. I took it all in. Like his pain had been left on my skin, not because he asked me to, but because what hurt him somehow burned in me too. At night I spent more time on the balconies than in the chamber I'd been given. There, wrapped in a nameless sky and the strange heat of that land, I thought about my family, how they'd never look for me, how to them my absence was already history. And it didn't hurt like I thought it would. It hurt less for them, more for me, for the girl I thought I was, for the woman I was discovering now, who'd always been alone. One of those nights, Cale appeared beside me. Didn't say a word, just stayed there, sitting eyes on the horizon, like we were waiting for the same miracle. And it was him who broke the silence, for the first time in days. "You're not afraid of me." I looked at him, at that skin holding the dark glow of coal, at veins pulsing like rivers of heat, at a face older than any legend, and smiled. Not to mock, but because it was true. No, because you're the only one who doesn't try to erase me. He looked at me, in a way he never had before, like he finally saw, not the offering, not the human, but the whole woman. And there, in that moment of stillness and embers, I knew. Something had changed. Between us, inside us, something unsaid but burning. The next morning I didn't see him, or the day after, or the third. And that's when I realized. I was waiting for him, like he was part of what I was now, like his absence took up more space than his presence ever had. And when I finally went back to that massive hall where I'd first met him, he was there. But something was off. He was wounded. Not in body, but in his gaze. Something in him had pulled back, like he'd remembered, what he swore never to feel again. I approached slowly, and without looking at me, he said, "They crossed the border. Humans, armed, looking for you." My blood ran cold, not from fear of being taken, but because I understood what it meant. The world I'd fled was now threatening the only place where I'd learned to be whole, and Cale, as powerful as he was just one. One against a nation that didn't know mercy, and still, even facing the threat, he spoke like someone unafraid of death. But I saw it, in his eyes. The real terror wasn't that they'd take me. It was that he might have to let me go. And for the first time, I knew what was between us wasn't just fire. It was love. Brutal, silent, impossible, and about to be tested. That night, the moon didn't show. The sky was dull, swallowed by heavy clouds, like even it knew something was coming. Cale paced, but not with rage, with restraint. He wore silence like armor, and I understood that was his way of holding back, of not scaring me. But I wasn't made of fear anymore. I was made of the same thing he was now: loss, choice, everything that builds after the world falls apart. "They're not coming to take me back," I said, eyes down. "They're coming to erase what they can't control." Cale stopped, stayed silent for a long time, and when he finally spoke, his voice was more human than ever. "If you stay, they'll destroy everything. If I go, I destroy myself." There was pain in his eyes, and maybe guilt too, the old guilt of survivors. But now it mixed with something softer, the dread of feeling for me, for someone the world said shouldn't matter. But to him, I was already the center and the edge. He took me to the highest part of the stronghold, a place I'd never seen. There the air was thinner, hotter, like we were inside the mountain's own lungs. He opened his hand, and something gleamed, small, vivid, blazing. It was a scale, just one, a weathered gold, like it was forged from time. "It was my queen's," he said, "the last one who dared love an enemy." I touched the scale with reverence. It was light, barely weighed anything, but my hand shook like it held a piece of the world. She died for it. She lived for it. The words didn't come as comfort. They came as truth. And I knew, right there, what he was trying to tell me. That some choices burned, and even so, they were the only ones worth making. The next dawn, I went to him. Alone, fearless, with steady breath and a dry throat. He was staring at the sky again, like he could predict their arrival just by the cloud's movement. "I'm not running," I said, "and you're not sending me away." He turned his face. His gaze was a storm held back, made of 1,000 words he didn't say. "You're human. They're yours. I'm mine, and you're the first place that let me be." The silence fell between us like a vow, like a line only crossed if both are willing to bleed. And he crossed it with a step, a gesture, a touch on my face so light, so careful it felt more than any embrace. And in that moment, between what we were and what the world expected us to be, there was love. Not declared, not shouted, but whole, warm, dangerous. The next morning, we saw smoke on the horizon. The troops were closing in, and we were ready, not as king and princess, but as two hearts that chose, against everything, not to fade. The night before the fight, I slept beside him for the first time. Not in a lover's bed, but under the roof he'd made to shelter me, his body between the world and my sleep. Cale didn't say anything when I lay there, just stretched a wing over us like an ancient cloak. I didn't know if it was protection, farewell, or promise. Maybe all of it. The truth was, it didn't matter anymore. War was coming, and with it, the end of any illusions still left. I woke before sunrise. He was already up, staring at the horizon with clenched fists, like he was trying to hold back not the enemy, but his own past. I went to him and touched his hand. It was warm, solid, but it trembled. He'd never asked me for anything, not a word, not a move. But that morning he asked with his eyes, asked me to survive, to not let myself fade for him. "You're not made for war," he said, voice low, like he feared breaking something in me. "I'm not made for cages, Cale," I replied, "and staying quiet would just be another way to die." The first light of dawn revealed the shapes of men in the valley. Weapons raised, shields stamped with my family's crest. They didn't come to save me. They came to erase the mistake, to silence the shame of raising a daughter who chose to love a legend. Cale stepped to the mountain's edge and spread his wings. Not as a threat, as truce. He was the king they feared, and still he was the one hesitating to burn. The battle didn't start with a shout. It started with a look. The general, an old friend of my father's, saw me beside Cale. And in that instant it was clear. I wasn't a hostage. I was a traitor. I ran forward before any command was given, raised my voice, and for the first time I spoke like I wasn't asking anymore. I told them what I'd seen, what I'd heard, the lies, the erased memories, the peace they claimed to want but never upheld. I spoke of fire, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that warms. I spoke of him, of Cale, the man, the beast, the king, and the heart he still had, even after watching everything around. Him turned to dust. No one lowered their weapons, but something shifted. The wind slowed. The sky quieted. And then an arrow sliced the air. It didn't come from the men. It came from behind. A lone hunter. A face I didn't know. But Cale saw, before I did. Moved fast, faster than I thought possible. And the sound of the arrow cutting the wind was swallowed by the sound of impact. When he threw himself in front of me, his body fell, heavy, warm, alive. Still here, he whispered, blood dripping from his lips. Still yours, I screamed, not from pain, from fury. Screamed like the whole world could collapse with my voice, and the world shook, because in that moment he rose, not as man, not as beast, but as something new, something born from what we were together, fire and flesh, legend and truth. He didn't kill, just burned the weapons, melted the fear, and then came down, slowly, to me, wounded, but standing. The men fell back. Some dropped to their knees, not from weakness, from awe. And that day there was no victory. There was silence. Silence before the impossible. Cale lived, but not without scars. Neither did I. We left that land, not to run, to exist. We remade ourselves in other corners, in other skins, not as king and princess, but as two who chose not to, be destroyed by those who never knew how to love. Today, no one sings our story in town, squares or city halls. But sometimes on very still nights, a flame flickers high in the mountains. And they say, if you follow that light, you'll find something. No nation could contain a heart that chose to burn without being consumed.